Brian. On this podcast, we'll talk about law enforcement, social networking, media platforms, and just life. So we'll jump into some social media right off the bat. So I'm sure everybody's aware, they've been watching the news, and our president is going after TikTok. They're saying that it's an information gathering site and that the Chinese are going to use it for something bad. Well, you know, here's the thing. If all your information that you normally put on these websites isn't already out there about 15 times anyway, well, you're just not doing much work on the internet anyway. Just about any of these things, Amazon, Google, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all of these require all the same information as TikTok. So I don't know what more danger that could prove to be than any of these others. Now, for whatever reason, and I know a big part of it's because he's upset with China, so we're going to make life as rough on China as possible. So the proposal here is for an American-based company to buy the American side of TikTok. I don't know how they can. I don't know how they can force the hand on this, because TikTok's based out of China. If they want to say, you know what, tough, then y'all just won't have TikTok. That's how I'd handle it. But instead, they've somehow got Microsoft in negotiations to buy the United States part of TikTok. I mean, I didn't realize it was sectioned off like that. I figured it was just one thing that went all the way around the world. I didn't know it was sectioned off. So what they've done, if they do that, that's going to put a new player in the ring on social media in the United States. I mean, right now your big hitters are YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Well, you put TikTok in there and now you've got a real contender, because they could obviously go in and figure out how to monetize that platform like YouTube has and like Facebook has. And, you know, you've got another heavy hitter in the ring. Because how much simpler would it be to put out, like, I don't know, 10 15-second videos a week? I mean, you've taken 2 minutes out of your day. Probably a little more. You got to edit these things. But just my point is, you could fill up TikTok with tons of content for the amount of time that we spend doing content for YouTube. I mean, just as an example, this right here, I try to get as close to 30 minutes as I can each time I do a podcast. I don't always pull it off. Sometimes I'm a little short. Sometimes when I interview people, I go too long. But you think about that, and then I spend, I'll be honest, this thing takes the longest to edit for YouTube, and you would think it would be my woodworking, but it's not. The woodworking, I'm changing locations, I'm doing different things. I'm going from a sanding station over to a saw, to staining, to painting, whatever. On here, I'm sitting in the same spot and talking. So I literally have to listen to the whole podcast again, many parts more than once, so I can figure out how to best edit it. It takes me an hour and a half to edit this thing. If I were better at this, and wouldn't have pauses and didn't screw up a lot when I talk, I wouldn't have this issue. I could just do the podcast, throw it on YouTube. And there are people who do that. And there's nothing wrong with that, because they're really good at talking. They are very professional with this. And I'm Mr. Amateur Hour over here. So anyway, just back to the point there. I mean, I don't understand how they're going to regulate it down to where you can't access TikTok while it's owned by a certain company, but when a different company owns it, you can access it. Man, that seems like a lot of regulation. I'm just saying, if I want to access that, that should be my right. I mean, I don't have any big government secrets that I'm concerned about the Chinese learning from me, but I'm not the one in charge of this, once again. And again, I think it's just a big pull for the administration up there right now, just to give another jab there in the side to China, along with all the trade sanctions and all that stuff. Just one more thing to say, we'll put it to you again. And to put that in perspective, could you imagine, let's use China for example, saying, oh, you know what, we're going to retaliate to you there. We're going to go back at you. We no longer want Facebook in China. We're not going to allow Facebook to operate in China. And so what we're either going to do is either force you out, or you're going to have to sell your chunk of Facebook to the Chinese government. All I can tell you right now, just from what I've read and know about Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg, he ain't going to do it. He would just say, well, that's fine. China doesn't have Facebook anymore. You're out. That would probably be his response. And I wouldn't blame him. The guy doesn't need the money. Hey, so it wouldn't be that big a deal that he didn't sell a part of it. And I don't blame him for it either, because now you're selling a part of a system that you've spent years developing and you're being forced to sell it? No. So to me, that's kind of the same situation as TikTok sitting on the other side of the pond. Okay, so just this one government's going to force us out and going to require us to either get out or sell it to one of their local companies? No. As long as they're making enough money off of it, which I assure you they are, because their ad revenue has to be through the roof. You know, about every 5 or 6 video, you see an ad on there, and it's tons of stuff. Well, I wouldn't sell. Just standing from that standpoint, I wouldn't sell to anybody, because you're going to give up what you've already developed. And so now they're going to take what you developed and twist it and contort it however they want and use it for their own profits. I wouldn't do it. Now, like I said, I think it's ridiculous that they're even looking at this. I don't see how they're stealing any more information off TikTok than we get taken from us every day, off of every other website we get on. Anything you have to sign up for or put any of your information in, guess what? It's being used somewhere. So the next thing, I just read this article earlier, and it was pretty interesting. You know, they were talking about the Murder Hornets. With all this other stuff going on, they're talking about Murder Hornets. What Murder Hornets are a larger size hornet from Japan, and they are very aggressive towards other bees and insects. They're not really a huge threat to humans. But what the big fear is in the United States is one of their delicacies, one of the things they love to prey on is honeybees. And so if a large population of them moved to the United States, it could wipe out our honeybee population. So the only place that I know of that they've actually located any of them is in the Northwest, Washington State, I think. And I think they've only got 2, maybe 3 now. I know for sure they've got 2 because this article I was reading was showing them. They were explaining the size of these things. And like a queen for them can be up to 2 inches to 2.5 inches long, 3 to 3.5 inches wide. And the article actually said that's wider than an iPhone, which that's a big old hornet. I mean, that wingspan at 3.5 inches, that's a big dude. So what they do is they go into a honeybee nest and they literally bite their heads off and then prey on the rest of the body. And the article I was reading said that they could kill up to 40 honeybees a minute. Now, I don't know that that's one hornet. It's probably a swarm of them could do that, or several of them could do that. I doubt one hornet could pull that off, but who knows? So there's the biggest issue. And that is a big issue because, you know, honeybees are one of the largest pollinators we have. And, of course, as their name implies, we get a lot of honey from them. So I don't know for certain what the course of action here is going to be. I know they are going to try to keep track of as many of them as they can. And they're going to try to eliminate them and keep them out of our country. Again, I don't know that they're going to pull it off completely, but, you know, they can fight it and keep our honeybee population alive. So I was talking to a buddy, and he said he had also read some about this, and he said honeybees have actually devised a way to kill the murder hornets. And so if one hornet comes in and just thinks it's going to have a little snack, and they hit a nest, all the honeybees will dogpile the hornet. And you're thinking, well, if they sting them, they die. Well, they don't sting them. They just get around him and make the hornet basically have a heat stroke because of all the heat of all the bees around it that Hornet dies. So like he and I were talking, I assume if a full swarm of Hornets came, the bees are just out of luck. But if it's just 2 or 3, they've already figured out a way to take them out, which I think is amazing. So that, from what I'm gathering, is the big deal with the murder hornets. It's not going to be the next pandemic, but it may be for bees. That's basically what it's pointed to. Okay, so to cover some listener questions, that some of it stems from last week when I was talking about RVing. Do you have to have tag and insurance on an RV? Well, okay. So RV, recreational vehicle, or are you talking camper trailer or a travel trailer? Like a toy hauler, stuff like that. That is what I'm looking at, is a travel trailer, something that I hook onto the back of my pickup, pull in a trailer, and we're going down the road. So here's the answer to that. On those, you have to tag them, yes. They have to be tagged. Do they have to be insured? Well, they're not a motor vehicle. So you don't have to insure them, but you have to look at this. If you've got a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 trailer, don't you want it insured? What if somebody blows an intersection, plows into that thing, and or say you blow an intersection, somebody T-bones your trailer and totals it. Your motor vehicle insurance is going to take care of the accident, but the damage to your trailer is going to be taken care of by the insurance company, which you get insurance from. So that's my take on it. I think you'd want it insured. Just another good example like that, the other night when we had 81-mile-an-hour winds here, and it was picking up. We still have pine cones about 80 yards from our pine tree, all over the yard. Imagine those are sticks or parts of trees flying around. What if it shoved a big piece of tree through your trailer? Don't you want it insured? So that's just my take on that. Do you have to insure it? No. Do you have to tag it? Yes. That's the short answer of it. So now the other part of that you got to look at is, although the state is not requiring you to insure it, probably whoever you're getting a loan through to buy it is going to require you to have insurance. They're probably going to require you provide proof of insurance in a certain amount of time, 30 days or whatever, because they want to know that their asset is covered. That way, if something happens to that trailer, you can't just go, "Well, not paying for it anymore. It got totaled. Tornado hit it. Somebody T-boned it. Tree flew through it during a windstorm." Well, that's not exactly the way that works. That's not their fault that your property got torn up, the one that you were buying from them, and you're not done buying it yet. So if you've got $3,000 into it, it gets totaled, you still own the rest. So although it's not going to be illegal to go down the road without that thing insured, because you can pull a flatbed trailer, 16-foot flatbed trailer, and it doesn't have to be insured. And as long as you're not doing anything commercial, you don't have to have it tagged. I'm not sure why the travel trailers have to be tagged, other than it's part of you're going to be part of a traveling industry. It's going to be, tourism. So that's my take on that part of it. I think you're going to end up having to have insurance of some kind on that trailer, simply so if something happens to it, the lender doesn't get worked over on the deal if something happens to it and you stop paying on it or whatever. And now that's me talking here from Oklahoma. That little law may vary state to state, because things like that do work differently. I mean, I'll just give you an example on tags. How many of you realize that in Texas, you got to have a tag on the front and the back of a vehicle? Both. In Oklahoma, you just have to have it on the back. And in Oklahoma, if you pull a trailer all the time, like you're a hot shotter, you can put it on the front. That works too. So each state's just a little different with the way they work things, and so that insurance still may work a little different when you cross the state line. So you might be careful. So on the follow up to that question from that person, no, we haven't got a trailer yet. We actually had our eye on one and have been keeping an eye on it at this RV dealership. It sold last week, and it's the only one they got like that. We've located another one, but we're not buying from them. I'll just leave it there. They're harder to deal with. We've already talked to them, and we're not going to waste our time just because, let's just say they stood their ground a little too hard from the beginning, and we weren't even being serious yet. So, yeah. And here's the truth of it. They upset my wife. They made her mad. So, we're not going back there, I can promise you. Okay, the next one. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, this one wants to know how radar in patrol car works. Well, just to dumb it down, I mean, it shoots out a wave, hits the car that's approaching, that wave bounces off, comes back, and it reads the speed. I mean, it does more than that. It does some calculations in there and figures out the time and distance, all that stuff, through the wave that bounced and came back, and determines how fast you're going. But the thing of it is while you're moving, that wave is constantly hitting, bouncing back and forth. And what it's doing, it's showing a difference in the speed. It'll show you, okay, from right there, you were doing this, and for here, you're doing this. So it'll show you a continuous speed. So the question also included, if we're driving down the road, if the patrolman's driving down the road, and you're driving from the other way, can you do it? Well, yeah. Because, I mean, that's a pretty easy one. I'm driving this way, you're driving that way. The computer inside the radar takes care of my speed. It determines how fast I'm doing. It bounces it, and so then it can adjust and tell me how fast you are doing. So whenever you go by, can I hit you going the other way? Newer radars, yes. When I first got on, no. When I first got on, that speed would have been all screwed up. But now the newer ones, that most of them are lasers, they really are amazing. I can pick up your speed both directions, even if I am moving. And the crazier one on the newer radars that I was using right before I retired, you could be ahead of me a mile, going the same direction, and I can hit you on radar and get your speed. So I mean, that's pretty impressive. And you just had to hit a button. You had to hit the same direction, and it does it. And we've got little keypads in there, and you just push all these little buttons, whichever one, if you're coming to me, going away from me, if we're moving, or if we're doing the same direction stuff. Okay, so that person's follow-up question. So I've got a radar detector. Do they actually work? And do y'all know when we have them? Well, yes and no on both of those questions. Okay, so yes, they'll work as long as I'm sitting there with my radar just on, and I'm radaring every car that comes by. Well, yeah, then your radar detector is going to go off, however far, line of sight, and picks it up, and it's going to beep at you and let you know that there's radar being used ahead. And do I know you have it? Well, usually we don't run radar that way. So here's how we usually run radar. We've got a button that says it's basically on off, and so I hit it real quick and hit it right back off. And I can tell, I can just sit there and go beep, hit that car, beep, hit that car, beep, hit that car. And I can tell which one is going what speed. So your radar detector is not going to go off until that thing is activated and emitting that wave, letting that wave go. So the way I can tell if you got a radar detector is when I hit your car, if all of a sudden you slow down a lot, real fast. And we see it. I mean, and it's pretty funny. We're going, whoa, radar detector there. And do I have a problem with them? Well, if you're using them to get around the law, the speed limit laws, yes, I've got a problem with that. If you're using it to keep yourself in check, which many people do, they'll do that and they'll hit that, oh, I need to slow down, I'm getting a little out of hand. But you'd be amazed at the number of people that have them that don't speed. They use it for that reason alone. It helps keep them in check so their foot doesn't get heavy. Have no problem with that. Anything to help people drive safer is fine with me. Okay, if you notice this week I didn't do my normal little disclaimer. However, I'm not going to talk about actual traffic law as far as you're in this situation, this is what happened, how do I handle it? So the next one, these are all questions that I've actually had for a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. I just trying to figure out how to address them without making it sound traffic law. Are speed traps legal? Okay, well, you know places where people call it a speed trap, and those are usually small towns. The actual thing with a trap means that I led you into it, making you do something illegal, and then decided you for it. So it's hard to determine what a speed trap is at that point, because I had a lot of places around the counties, these couple of counties that I would sit and work traffic a lot. People knew I sat there a lot, so a lot of them would slow down. A lot of people didn't know I sat there, and I caught a lot of people just because they were good locations. Now, did I consider it a trap? No. I wasn't forcing them. I'm going to give you an example. One of them was on exit 51, I-35. You exited off onto US 77 just south of Davis, and I would sit in the median right there. Well, the reason I sit there is the speed limit goes from 65 to 55 and then down to 50. And I knew where every sign was. Now, I didn't wait, and if you were right there at that last sign and you were still doing 55, that I'm jumping on you. It doesn't work like that. What I'm looking for is those that jump off the interstate that have been doing 80 miles an hour, and they jump off on this little 4-lane highway that's not very long into Davis, and you're still doing 80. Well, yeah, you're doing 30 over speed limit. There's a problem there. We got issues. So I've never considered that a trap, because I didn't force you to drive that speed. And the speed limit sign sure didn't trick you anyway. They always read the same thing. So, and I said that little short highway 77, it's not really a short highway. It goes all the way across the state, but the short section to Davis is 50 miles an hour. So, no, I'm assuming there's probably rulings about speed traps. I would just like to know what they determine a speed trap to be. Because the places I used to sit and work, most of them were a straightaway. You could see me if you actually paid attention. I'm sitting there in the median, clear as day. Or another one was at the end of a turnpike, and it was where Chickasaw Turnpike met Highway 7. Well, if I'm working the turnpike, I would turn and point back up the hill. You're coming right at me. Now, if you top that hill at 85, 90 miles an hour, yeah, got you. It wasn't a real busy spot. Now, Highway 7, the same spot, I could shoot back towards town. I could get you coming out of city limits, and you'd be amazed at what people do to get out of town. They jump that thing up to 80, 85. Well, the speed limit's 70 all the way across it. So, yeah, you're wrong. So, no, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure speed traps, I'm sure there's an actual term speed trap that is illegal somewhere, and there's been a ruling. But from my point of view, I don't know how to actually define one. Usually people refer to speed traps as small towns, towns of like 500,000 people. They've got 2 police officers, and they are just bent on writing everybody that comes into town a ticket, just to make a revenue for the city. The one place I did run into one, I ran into one, a small town. I'm not going to mention the town because I don't know where the officer's at, and I don't want to incriminate him or get him in trouble or anything. But I was still working, and I came, and there was a curve in this town that's almost 90 degrees. I mean, you're going north and you turn and you go east, and it's just a smooth curve. Well, he shoots me across this curve, and I've talked about it before. It's an angle of incidence where you can't go above 22 degrees. This guy was setting at least 35 degrees, maybe up to 45 degrees from me and shooting across. Well, that adds to your speed. So this guy pulls me over and tells me I'm speeding. And I said, I assure you I wasn't. I pay attention to this stuff a lot. And so, he bowed up because, he didn't like hearing that answer. And I told him, he started talking, and I said, just go write the ticket, man. I'll see you in court on it. And we're going to have a talk about it. And he came back for a minute, and he goes, do I know you? I said, yeah, you do. I'm one of the troopers here. And if you're writing tickets there, you're wrong. And if you've written any tickets today, cancel them. They're wrong. It's not right. And, he let me go. And I explained to him the angle of incidence. He was sitting across that angle. He can't sit at that hard of an angle. And I never saw him sit there again. Now then, do I know whether or not he canceled all those tickets? I doubt it. I'm sure they've done that for a long time right there. But since then, and that's been years ago, I've never seen another officer sit there and try to work traffic, because they probably learned now that, hey, you can't do that. That's a big no-no. So to me, that's a speed trap because they're not doing it correctly. But if they're doing it correctly and they're just sitting in a spot in town, I don't see how it's a trap. You're driving down that road, and if you're doing the speed limit, nothing happens. And if you're not, something could happen. It's just like driving down the highway and running into one of us. That's not a trap. I just happen to be driving down the same road as you and got you when you were really flying. So I don't know if that's going to answer your question or not, but that's about the best answer I got for you. So guys, right there, I'm going to wrap this one up. If y'all haven't done so yet, run over and check me out on Smokey CNC Woodworks, especially this week. I did a new thing called Halftone. It's really awesome. It puts a photographic image into a board. Just go check it out, see what that's about. It's pretty interesting. And if you all guys hadn't checked out all the places to find me at Smokey Uncuffed, right here on this podcast that you may be listening to, on YouTube, which you may be watching me on, or at my website at www.smokeyuncuffed.com. I've got all my podcasts there, some of the items I use, and just a few links. So guys, that's going to be it for today. If y'all haven't done so yet, please subscribe, and I'll see y'all and hear y'all next time.